Well, hello everyone. This is John Byrne with Poets and Quants. I have in the house two of my favorite people, Matt Symonds and Judith Silverman Hodara, both from Fortuna Admissions. We're going to talk about the magnificent M7 and what every M7 applicant needs to know before they actually apply. Now, we know for sure that if you graduate from an M7, your starting salary is going to be pretty darn high. But what do applicants misunderstand about the real return on investment of an M7 MBA? Judith?
I love that we're starting with a pragmatic question, John. So thank you. I'm going to start out and just say, sure, the headline number really matters. You're going to be looking at 200 to 250,000 total compensation in year one. That's kind of a given. It's a realistic baseline across consulting, tech, and I would say also private markets. But I want to be careful to only focus on that in particular because you're kind of missing the rest of the iceberg, right? If you're just looking at that headliner. So when you go to an M7, this is not like an outcome of, oh, I'm buying this job, right? And that job is worth $200,000. It is really a lifetime of figuring out what happens next because you're always thinking about what happens next, not just the first job out, but what happens after that. So you're going to be on tracks that are going to help you get to a partner track or an operating role or investing positions that might take longer without the MBA. So employers are going to assume a certain amount of horsepower. They are going to assume some leadership, a lot of leadership readiness, and just the sense that you are ready to go, right? So that's going to truncate that what might take a decade to get to certain positions. What's important to think about when you're going through the application process is vague goals are really problematic as you write your essay and as you talk about yourself. So if you're talking about, I want to go into consulting, it's really like a category, but it's not an actual goal. So when I was at Wharton and in all the years that we've been working together at Fortuna, we're asking a lot of questions like, what problem do you want to solve? Why are you the person that's going to solve it? And how does the MBA help you get to the point that you can solve it, right? So it's really a bunch of very introspective considerations. It's fine to start with, I want to go into consulting, but the strongest candidates are able to understand and show really that they understand where they are and they understand how to get to where they want to go. So it's the MBA, then what happens, and then what happens, and what does the MBA really unlock for you? And so again, just to reiterate, yes, the total compensation is a piece of it, the start of it, but it's the deeper questions that are really going to be under consideration by admissions.
Yeah, so true. Matt, we often say that, would you learn more from your classmates than you ever would from the faculty in almost any MBA program? But in an M7, I wonder how true that is in practice.
Well, those amazing meet the class profiles that you run on Poets and Quants, some of those voices, the backgrounds, the experience, the thought processes, they just jump off the page. Of course, the case method professors, they're all important too. But I think who you're sitting next to, that's the real intellectual stimulus. You're sitting next to people that have led platoons, they've invested billions, that they're shaping policy. Take a look at HBS's network. What is it? Over 85,000 alums across 173 countries. They're everywhere. And at influence, it's a massive scale of influence at these top schools. And I think that starts on day one in the classroom. That must be a magical day at these schools, meeting everybody else. And I think it resets your own thinking because you're constantly learning through a completely different viewpoint, the insights and perspectives. Now, that's the obvious transition, of course, to how the admissions committee is thinking about that. What is that voice? What is that insight that you will bring to that classroom experience? They're going to cold call you in a case, right? You've got 60 seconds to say something worthwhile and insightful that moves the discussion on. And so admissions, I think, is constantly trying to get a sense of those sort of perspectives and the voice that you will bring. So I think admissions can they can quickly see who has truly engaged with a school versus those that have skimmed the website. Impressive, of course, if you've memorized the curriculum. But hey, I think those that really stand out, that they've had real conversations. One thing at Fortuna that we're always recommending: find that second year student or maybe a recent grad that themselves is playing a leadership role beyond the classroom. Because these schools, as you know, John, they have hundreds of clubs and tracks and activities. Well, reach out to Francesca or Deepak or Michael or whoever it might be, whether they're the president of the tech club or the robotics club, or they've probably got some great cooking clubs too. They themselves are contributing to an aspect that is so much part of this 2-year experience. Wharton has now embedded this in a question that says, how will you contribute to the Wharton community? And they want you to really be able to share and give some input on that.
And that has long been true at Harvard as well in crafting the class. Now, you mentioned a magical word, Matt, and I want to get Judith's opinion on this. You mentioned the word leadership. And of course, M7 schools talk a lot about leadership, and they don't just mean a job title. So, what are they really looking for, Judith?
I would 100% agree with you, John. It is not a job title. It is not abstract. And it's really how you're making decisions and judgment under pressure, right? It's a part of that conversation. So learning in your MBA program, in the M7, what it's like to operate in ambiguity, how you can help others arrive at decisions without necessarily having a title, like I am the quote leader, and stepping in and taking responsibility when you don't always know what the outcome is going to be, right? You're kind of saying, raising your hand and saying, I will take the opportunity to bring this to you. I will work through this with you. This is what the schools are developing, and this is ultimately what they're selecting for. So it's part of every single thing that we work on with our students. And when admissions committees are looking for leadership, they're looking for a pattern. They're looking for consistency. So if you said, oh, I've been a leader, I've been involved, the schools are going to want to look at examples of times that you influenced others, times that you brought others along with you on a vision, times that it wasn't so easy to bring others along with you on a vision, that you really wrestled with it and it wasn't so obvious. Opportunities that you've taken a leadership role, maybe without being said, okay, you're the leader right now and follow the leader, but that you've helped to make something happen. There's an outcome as a result of what you've been engaged with. And most importantly, and this applies to everybody from, age 16 and up. I can say that as the parent of a high school junior. What did you learn and how did you change from the experience, right? And that is applicable across the lifetime and across the lifespan, especially in your time in your MBA program. So recognizing that being authentic is incredibly important. You're not always going to get it right. You may not always have all the answers. And if you over-engineer it, to use a word that we kick around a lot at Fortuna, it's not going to sound like you. And so when you're sharing your examples, the believable stories and the believable examples are the ones that may have some mistakes in them. They're not perfect. And they may not be shouting it from the rooftops. So they may be like a little bit on the quieter leadership side. But what you're really hoping for as you talk about it in your application is that groundedness in leadership, how you've wrestled with it, how you've owned it, and how it's become part of who you are across your life cycle.
Now, one of the big promises of the M7 is the ability to make a major career pivot. How real is that?
You made a great comment earlier about the acceleration, that's something, a career transition that might take 8 or 10 years, moving from engineering into investing or from the military into strategy consulting. That can happen in a single summer internship at these schools. And the exploration there, think about a school like Sloan and its relationship with MIT. Now you're mixing with astrophysicists, and the opportunities and the career outcomes that can come from that seem almost endless. So I think 2 years gives you the time to explore. You can discover that your real passion lies in retail or building things, managing teams. The geography of Columbia Business School is going to open up so many opportunities on your doorstep in New York. We know that industries like private equity that have been so prized by MBA graduates in the past couple of decades, they really don't look much beyond the M7 schools fulfilling those positions. So why For one thing, I think employers trust the filter. I mean, these schools have effectively de-risked you in such an incredibly
Mm.
selective admissions process, and whether it's, collaborative leadership styles at Kellogg, that sort of analytically rich mindset at Chicago, Booth and Wharton. Now the schools, they say, why now for that career move? Why this school? And it's not enough just to say, hey, I'm ready. You need to demonstrate that to them. This is an inflection point in your career, and why this MBA is the essential accelerant. So many candidates talk about the case method at Harvard Business School, or how they want to take the interpersonal dynamics touchy-feely course at Stanford. They must have heard, well, we know they've heard it a million times, Judith. You've got so many of those cliches in applications. So, you know, talking about a school that really identifies those strengths, the culture and personality of the school, because that's all sort of feeding into the opportunities, the career transitions, the acceleration that you're then going to be able to see. And I think the best applicants, it's not easy to get there, but they make it feel inevitable. Without this, the next step doesn't work. And when the admissions get sight of that, you're in a really good place.
Right. Now, people often talk about the M7 MBA as a transformational experience. That's a word you hear very often. What does it really mean day to day?
I love that word. You do hear it a lot in MBA admissions and applications. Day to day, I think there's an underestimation of what's going to actually happen. It is happening sometimes at the speed of light. It's sometimes happening in a conversation. It may be happening in a class. But let's look at Harvard, for example. You are forced to take a position repeatedly, very publicly, and with a lot of people looking at you, right? So you really, it's almost gonna like, it's almost like you're taking coal and you're putting that pressure on it. So it becomes very polished, very refined, very much like a diamond. And at Stanford, the integration of leadership development and self-reflection, it really asks you from the get-go. I mean, if you remember those questions, not what you're going to want to do with that MBA, but why you do it. And what is it that gets you out of bed in the morning, really has you believe that this is something that is worthwhile. When I was at Wharton, we had a dean who frequently said, a lot of you are coming in knowing or thinking you're knowing what your path is going to be. And I would be a rich man if I bet you on the fact that it's going to be very different when you're leaving. So that's part of the amazing transformative process, is being open to that redefinition. And without a doubt, this is what the essays are looking for, from my perspective. It's not just, hey, what do you want? But it's really, how do you think about things? What is it that's going to encourage you to grow? How does that transformation happen? And that's why, in working with students and reading essays, it's really curiosity that is driving the conversation. It is showing to the admissions directors that you have this ability to be really introspective. You recognize that this is a time that you're going to be challenged, and it's not always going to be comfortable, and it's not always going to be pretty. It's going to get kind of messy sometimes, and there are going to be days that you come home and you're like, I can't possibly do this anymore. And then you get up the next day and you try again. So you're open to that change. It's not just stamp of approval, you get your MBA. And it is really about coming with a very open mind and recognizing that that reflection piece is going to be what helps you start that process. So ultimately, you may have a lot of ambition, you may have a lot of goals, but being open to recognizing that that is going to be part of the transformation is going to be a
Mm,
terrific part of your application.
indeed. Now, in terms of transformation, a lot of people use MBA programs as an incubator for a business idea, and entrepreneurship seems more central than ever at schools like Harvard and Stanford. What's behind that trend?
Now, we're both entrepreneurs, John, but I think this one is just going to grow and grow at the M7 schools, at the MBA in general. We talk about the single person unicorn. That's going to happen in the next 2 years. Maybe it'll be a graduate of one of these M7 schools. It's no longer the side path. I know that we've always tracked, incredible numbers when you see, 3, 4, 5% that will start their venture coming out of business school. That's up to 50% in the 5 to 10 years after school. But even now, what Stanford is sending 23% of its class into their own ventures or search funds. The Harvard Wharton numbers are creeping up there too. And I think in an AI-driven economy,
Mm.
that entrepreneurial mindset and entrepreneurial to bringing that sort of entrepreneurial thinking into businesses that are completely transforming the way that they're doing businesses. So building things, this is, I think, going to be one of the biggest themes of business school in the next decade. Now, Stanford, of course, they have that famous tagline, right, about change lives, change organizations, change the world. There can be a lot of I want to change the world in applications. Now, that's fine, but you need to back it up. As you know, a couple of times a year, I sit down with the admissions directors of the top schools at Centercord and with Stanford GSB. We talk a lot about change lives, change the world. Now, I can picture us at the NASDAQ Center with Kirsten talking about she would always say, our admissions team at the JSB, we're like detectives. So, if you say, I'm going to change the world and I'm going to build this business, they're going to be reading through that resume to find the demonstration of that mindset. That you're someone that does solve problems and that you get up off the couch and do something about it. The idea that you could scale an idea about it. So truly, I think that business schools have a massive role to play in building things. I think entrepreneurship is just going to grow and grow in all of these schools. But you, as a candidate, can you articulate why you are the person to achieve that? And you don't have to have it all worked out, but demonstrating that you've got the mindset that will achieve it.
Right. Now, finally, the value of an M7 is often described as lifelong. But does that really play out over an entire career?
I think it does. I think that the ROI doesn't end because you're okay, got my degree, moving on. I mean, you think about it like a compound, right? And people people that they know, your classmates, your alumni, everybody in that database, which is extraordinarily large. I know because I've been in it and looking for people to talk to. You're going to find co-founders, investors, board members, people that are going to advise you. There's no doubt that, and Matt, I hope you'll talk about this as well, that it's a network that deepens over age. I mean, I'm reaching back now to people that I knew from 20 years ago who are doing extraordinary things and are sharing that experience with us and letting some of our students talk with them about what does it look like 5, 10, 20 years out. So that value is just compounding, compounding, compounding. And also, interestingly, accelerating at the same time. So there's just tremendous value in that return. And I'm sure that Matt has a couple of ideas and
The
things.
three of us are champions of business education because we've seen it, right? And poets, you've put numbers on it. Of course, we understandably think about that first position coming out of the MBA program, but the poets calculation, and it was done with great analysis and depth. You're looking at $8-10 million difference returns over the following decades, and not just that. I think all of the intangibles, new responsibilities, possibly new countries and things that you're pursuing in all of that. The network, I think, just gets stronger. It was interesting. The new admissions director at Stanford, just about to do her alumni reunion, she says we're even closer today than we were during the program. The self-confidence. There are so many dimensions to how you look at ROI. So, candidates look at a major investment. But I think these M7 schools have proved, for the last, forever, for the last 40, 50 years, just how deep that return is. And I suppose that's why fit matters. Again, from the lens of admissions, they're not just admitting you for the 2 years of the program, right? They're selecting you as a lifelong member of that community. And I think, to authentically be able to demonstrate, and perhaps from your background, perhaps from undergrad and other things that you've done, that you will be that individual that continues to contribute to that community, not just in the 2 years, not just in the classroom, but everything that takes place beyond that. Are your classmates, are they people that are going to want to stay connected with you? So, I think a great mindset, if you're applying to these M7 schools, maybe it's an exercise that we do with clients at Fortuna. Write an application for your 20-year reunion and not
I
just
love that one.
graduation day, because those are the timeframes that we're looking at on what's going to be a life-changing and extraordinary experience.
Well, there you have it, why the M7 are magnificent. 7 questions, 7 answers from Judith and Matt. Thank you very much. Really
Fantastic
enjoyed
to
it.
do with you.
Thank you.
And for
Likewise,
all of
John.
you out there, check out Fortuna Admissions and let them help you get into an
Yeah,
M7 school.
don't forget to send Judith that essay of what matters most to you and why, John.
Will do.